Welcome to State of Mind. Being human and living well.
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 I'm Deborah Sloss, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and the show's producer and regular host. Today, I'm handing the mic over to poet, writer, artist, teacher, and state of mind story coach Patrice Vecchione, who will be guest hosting this episode. Patrice helped initiate this conversation after witnessing her friend Kevin navigating a terminal medical diagnosis. In this episode, we'll explore the profound mental health implications of living with a terminal illness. Through personal stories and expert insights, we'll discuss the emotional realities and the ways people navigate hope, loss, and the search for meaning when time is limited and everything is uncertain. With that, I'll turn it over to your guest host, Patrice Vecchione.
Thank you, Deborah. A terminal diagnosis changes everything, from how we think about the future to how we inhabit the present. The grief, fear, and unpredictability can be overwhelming, yet alongside that roller coaster, people often find unexpected strengths, deeper connections, clarity of purpose, and moments of grace. I was moved to explore this topic after my creative writing student Kevin's cancer became terminal. Before that time, she'd maintained her life close to how it had been before becoming ill. When the therapy stopped helping and she chose to stop treatment, her decline over several months was significant. It's been moving and also startling to witness her strength and determination to live whatever time remains for her fully and with great integrity. This led me to reflect on how people navigate this stage of life, what supports them, what's challenging, and what we can learn from listening closely to their stories. In this episode, we hear from 3 guests who offer distinct, powerful perspectives. Megan Myers, who died at only 41, Dr. John Hausdorff, a palliative and hospice medicine doctor, and finally Kevin. We begin with Megan. Megan Myers was a lifelong Santa Cruz resident who devoted her life to healing, creativity, and movement. She studied and later worked at Twin Lakes College of the Healing Arts as an instructor, massage therapist, and bookkeeper. A passionate dancer, Megan also expressed herself through drawing, photography, and martial arts. In early 2024, after the loss of her spouse of 22 years, she was diagnosed with aggressive brain cancer. Just a few months later, with great honesty and courage, she joined us to share her experience of living through her final chapter. Welcome to State of Mind, Megan.
Thank you for having me.
Would you tell us about the type of cancer that you have and when you were first diagnosed with an incurable disease?
Certainly. It's called glioblastoma multiforme. It's a type of aggressive brain cancer. I was first diagnosed with it in, I want to say, December of last year. And I went through a lot of CAT scans and a lot of tests to get to that point. But ultimately, it was the surgery that showed the actual results of the form of cancer.
That's not very long ago, December. That's just a few months ago.
No, the actual surgery itself was January. So it's been a short amount of time.
Yeah, very short. How did you know that something was not right?
Well, there's a few pieces that I put together. I fell in my garage. I was alone, and I thought I was maybe reacting to some chemicals that I was working on with a car. And then ultimately, I want to say in November, I had a seizure, and I was not able to speak to my mom on the phone. with clear words. So she came up right over, and we rushed to the local hospital, and they thought it was a stroke. So they got me in right away.
That's good.
Gratefully. And then it kind of just snowballed from there.
Sounds like a really big snowball moving very quickly.
Indeed.
Yeah. How has your mental health shifted over this short period of time since you've been processing the reality of your diagnosis?
That's a large question. Some of it has not shifted. I do have a pretty big mental toolbox to draw from, just with previous work in my world. But there is also the other side of, facing the abyss of death, if you will, at a relatively young age. And it's a very, like I said, it's a very tough question to answer. Sometimes it's just, ups and downs, or just complete despair, or happiness, knowing that I have great friends and family who love me and support me.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't be more grateful for that.
Yeah, that's a lot of up and down. And how old are you, Megan, may I ask?
41.
You're very young. What has your experience with your health and treatment been since that time that you had the first seizure, since you fell and then had the seizure?
Well, pre-surgery, I was still working out. I really enjoyed martial arts, weightlifting, and cardio work. Post-surgery, it's a non-starter at this point. I just don't have. I have fatigue, and just I no longer have the use of my right arm, or parts of my right ankle area because of the damage from the tumors pre-surgery, which was known, and it was also known from my doctor, neurosurgeon, that it would be permanent even post-surgery. So my physical world has changed.
So how do you cope, and what gets you through the challenging times?
I'm kind of still figuring that out. That's a difficult question. I can still use my left hand, which is my, I am ambidextrous, or was, but I'm still able to draw and write, which is nice with my left hand. I just no longer can use instruments that I was, used to, or do photography. So it's a daily challenge to just navigate my world mentally and physically. And like I said, it's so new that I'm still trying to figure it out.
You said a few moments ago that you had a mental health toolbox. And what's in that toolbox?
Well, I had a great career about 10 years ago, working at a vocational college locally, and they taught a lot of classes that I would initially I took them and then would assist as teaching aid, or with business skills, or preparing mentally to work with the field that the school was in. A lot of hypnotherapy courses and accreditations, and also just soaking up the mentors that were available at the school, just working with them and sitting with them and just being with them. Also to therapy, psychotherapy, years of that, just in my world in general, as a patient. A lot of reading, just a lot of different facets in the world of, just
Mental health, huh?
yeah, mental health. Yes, thank you.
Do you feel a sense of purpose?
I do. I as long as I'm here, I want to physically here and mentally, I am declining. But as long as I'm still me, I would like to keep the pieces of me that matter most. And so far, I'm doing that. A- i- uh, in regards to family and friends. And I just, like I said, couldn't be more grateful for the people in my life.
We all need to be reminded of how important gratitude is. What, if anything, since your terminal diagnosis has been a real surprise to you?
Really, it's really a question I can't answer as far as surprise, other than just finding that there's cancer in my brain. It's just been very strange. I'm taking it, one day at a time, and I don't really know how to answer that question. I just the speed of and the severity and the aggressiveness of the cancer, I guess, is probably the biggest surprise. And the short amount of time that I have left is probably also the other largest surprise.
And the other guest we talked to about this topic, who's also has a terminal diagnosis, she said she was surprised that she couldn't beat it. I'm going to break in here just to clarify that we also interviewed Kevin, another guest with lived experience who you'll meet later in the show. Here, I am referencing something Kevin talked about. But for now, let's get back to the interview with Megan. She said she was surprised that she couldn't beat it. Did you have that experience?
I didn't. I've had people either in my life or stories from people in my life with people in their world that have my type of cancer, and it there is nothing other than the end result. And I did choose to not, other than the surgery to remove the tumors, just because it granted me a little bit more time, but it also to go in physically into my brain to remove them was the way to diagnose what type of cancer it was. But I through the stories from other people and other people in my life, I chose not to do the other therapies. And sometimes people in my situation who do those therapies will end up in the same time frame I am. And I did not want to put my body through that stress, since I'm going to end up in the same place. And absolutely no judgment to anyone who chooses any other form of therapies. It was just my personal choice. But that's also a big surprise, because the willingness and acceptance from my family and friends and physicians to just hear why I chose not to pursue, say, oncology or radiology, and everyone professionally, doctor-wise, has just treated me as a human, and with kindness, and I've been very grateful for that.
I'm so glad you've had that support. And you may also have preserved the quality of your life by not doing those treatments. I've heard how hard they can be.
Possibly, yes.
You talked a little bit about your family right there, and that leads me to the question, what has this journey of your illness and impending death been like for your loved ones?
I know there's no blame anywhere, but there's a part of me that just feels so bad for them. I'm leaving my parents and my sister and a brother-in-law and their two very young kids, and all my friends, and it is so hard on them. And not that anybody, everybody knows the reality of the situation, and we have accepted it. It is hard to see them daily with a smile on their face, but it's genuine.
What would you want someone else newly facing an incurable illness to know?
Oh, that's a big one to end on. It's hard to speak to anyone's individual situation, but just I would hope in their world, if there's anybody with them or in their world, to have compassion and empathy for what they're going to be going through, and also to be kind to themselves. It's a really weird situation. I understand, as cliche as it sounds, death comes for us all, but it is different when you're, in the throes of it. So I would hope someone would be kind to themselves, and to others. I know I've had a hard time wrestling with letting other people in my life help me, because I feel like I'm a burden at times, but I'm learning to see that more as love, and it is. Mm-hmm. And it's learning how to navigate that. But I would just hope anyone going through this situation would just, like I said, just be kind to themselves.
You're listening to State of Mind, Being Human and Living Well. I'm your guest host, Patrice Vecchione. Today, we're exploring what it's like to live with a terminal diagnosis. We've just heard from Megan Myers, who was approaching the end of her life with honesty and grace. Up next, we'll hear from Dr. John Hausdorff, a palliative care physician who supports individuals and families during this vulnerable stage. And later, writer Kevin Christine Kennedy will share her own experience of living with a life-limiting illness. You can find today's resource list, including anything we mention in the show, at stateofmindmedia.org. Now we'll talk with Dr. John Hausdorff, Medical Director of Supportive and Palliative Care and Hospice at Community Hospital of the Monterey Peninsula. He's board certified in internal medicine, oncology, and hospice and palliative medicine, and has been practicing in Monterey since 1996. Known for his compassionate, patient-centered care, he helps people face life's final stage with clarity and dignity. Welcome to State of Mind, Dr. Hausdorff.
Thank you, Patrice. Happy to be here.
You work in both hospice and palliative care, and we've found that many people don't fully understand what those two are or how they differ. Could you explain the difference between hospice and palliative care, and what are some misconceptions people have about each?
it starts with the problem, I think, with the word palliative, which is that it means different things to different people. So one way that the term palliative is defined is anything that cloaks, that makes better, that supports, but it's so vague that it can include everything, including hospice, technically. And I find that a really unhelpful definition. So what we've done is really define these as two totally separate entities. Hospice care, most folks are familiar with to some extent, is when we're done with our standard treatments and we're done with the hospital and we're done with interventions, we're done with scans and blood work. And the focus is I want to be comfortable for the time I have. And most people know that the Medicare requirement is an expectation of less than 6 months. Many people live longer. Others may live days or weeks. And you can always revoke and come off of hospice, but it is a covered entity. Medicare covers the cost, and we take care of folks, and you do as well as you can. And there are plenty of medicines that get continued. One of the myths is that meds get stopped. But on hospice, a lot of medicines that are not so helpful, we drop. And it's a great attraction when your list of medications is 28, and all of a sudden I can get rid of the vitamin D and the cholesterol medicine and these things that don't help that much. Palliative care, we define as care that's delivered before hospice, and that it's delivered alongside the regular medical care that you get from your primary care doc, your cardiologist, your oncologist. It is a supportive program. It's not a place. In fact, hospice isn't a place. Hospice is generally home-based for the vast majority of patients. In palliative care, we have inpatient care. You're in the hospital and the palliative care people come and try to help out. We have outpatient clinics where the palliative care folks meet you in the clinic. Occasionally, we'll meet folks at home. And the whole focus of the palliative care world is really how can we make things better given that we're in a tough spot. You're someone with, as we like to say, a chronic but life-limiting illness. We're thinking we have months or maybe a year or 2 or 3 or 4 years. But these are the toughest years. These are the years with the most medical care often, the most hospitalizations, the most symptoms. And so the whole realm of palliative care entails things from symptom management, like pain, to psychiatric assessment and psychological support. Depression and anxiety need to get identified, often need to be treated. Finding social supports, providing spiritual support if there are issues, and sometimes there are huge issues, religious or existential. Doing advanced care planning, making sure we've got the advanced directive in place and we know who's going to speak for you if you can't speak for yourself. Addressing the sometimes really awkward world of code status. Would you want to be put on a ventilator if things went really badly? And addressing fears around end of life. And that whole realm is the palliative care realm, distinct from and before the transition to hospice care.
So when you refer to the psychological aspect of care, of palliative care, would that mean therapy, counseling? What kinds of things would that include?
It's really variable. That's a great question. And I wish we had more psychiatric and more therapeutic professional support in our program. Most programs don't. There are people who clearly need that or clearly will benefit. And there are folks who already have that undertaken. More often, and this varies from palliative care program to palliative care program, more often it is being particularly attuned to the fact that this was a game changer, right? A terminal illness. And it's almost impossible not to get a little depressed at some point. It's almost impossible not to have an increase in anxiety. These things are sometimes missed by the treating physicians because the focus is often on the malignancy or the condition. You got a bad heart and it's a difficult one to work with, and there are different interventions and drugs. And so we try to pick up on depression that maybe wasn't noted. And then that could be simply talking about it and acknowledging it. It could be steering folks towards therapy. It could be starting a very simple antidepressant and seeing how we do. And the same is true for anxiety. It is striking how sometimes a little bit of alprazolam, Xanax, can take the edge off and clear someone's thinking so that they can deal with what they got to deal with, because anxiety, as we all know, is startling in its ability to obscure. So it's generally done in a less professional fashion beyond our capability, unless we need to fall back on the real pros.
Got it. In some cases, people facing a terminal illness will ask about medical aid in dying, or MAID, which is legal here in California and, to my understanding, in 10 other states and in Washington, D.C. It can be a complex and emotional topic for some. Could you explain what medical aid in dying is and what kinds of conversations you have with patients about it?
So firstly, it is two different things. Just as palliative care and hospice are really two very different things, medical aid in dying entails two very different and legally tremendously different things. If we're in Canada or the Netherlands or Belgium or New Zealand or Colombia, medical aid in dying includes the physician having the opportunity and the right to administer a drug directly into a patient who has requested this and has met the criteria. And that has the term euthanasia attached to it. And very specifically, the physician is administering a drug with the intent of ending a life of a terminally ill patient. That's part of MAID, but that's not part of MAID in the United States. So all of these countries that I mentioned have this. We do not. What we have is where the patient administers the medication themselves. And that line is enormous. It's the difference between doing something legally and me ending up in prison. That's a pretty sharp line. So what we have, our medical aid in dying in the United States, in the 10 states and in D.C., I think Delaware just passed the law, and it hasn't quite been implemented yet, is where the patient has, we think, less than 6 months, as best we can tell. They are clear-headed. They are asking specifically for medication to have that they could take if they choose to end their life. Again, they've got to be terminally ill, which of course is a judgment, physician judgment, less than 6 months. There can't be coercion, and there can't be mood disorders that are so profound that they get in the way of the patient being able to make a sensible decision. So you can be depressed, you can be on an antidepressant, you can be pretty darn anxious, but as long as you can make a clear decision and you understand what we're talking about, and it's very obvious in my face-to-face conversation, then those are the folks who are eligible. The physician has to have 2 separate visits. They're supposed to be face-to-face. The 2 separate visits used to be 2 weeks apart. Now it's 2 days apart, thanks to an amendment made in by the California Assembly. There has to be a second opinion doctor who agrees. It's usually the primary doc that was taking care of the patient in the first place. There's a little bit of paperwork to do. The patient has to fill out a request, and all of that paperwork then gets brought to a pharmacy that is willing to participate. We have one privately owned pharmacy locally that has been magnificent. And within a week from the first conversation, medications arrive at the door. Most of it's covered by Medicare or the insurance. The part that isn't will be $50, $70, $150. Won't be outrageous. And then that patient has the medications that they could take if they wish at any point. Every year, about a third of patients don't ever take them. So California keeps track of these statistics. It's on the California Department of Public Health website. They're required to. And every single year, it's the same thing. 3 prescriptions get written, 2 of the patients take them at some point, and 1 does not. The law does not specify what drugs. And because it's a lot of pills, what's often done is that the medications are ground up and they're powdered, and you make a slurry. You make a drink. You make the smoothie of a lifetime. The trick is the taste. So there are tricks to try to make it taste pretty good. And everybody falls asleep. And everybody succumbs in a remarkably peaceful way 2, 3, 4 hours later. And what it does, and I'll close with this, is first of all, it's a very small number of patients who do this. It is less than 0.3% of California deaths as of 2 years ago, the last data we have. So well less than 0.5%. It's very uncommon. But what it does do is for the small number of patients who want to do this, it gives them control. And if there's something about terminal illness that characterizes it strikingly, it is the fact that you've lost control. And bit by bit, you lose control of everything. And so oddly, this is a way, and many patients recognize this and they take advantage of this, of saying, can I please at least call the shots on this one?
Yes. Okay. I'd like to ask a follow-up question now. What happens if someone wants to use MAID, but by the time they're ready, they've lost the ability to make that decision due to cognitive decline? What can be done in those situations?
You're delving into the depths and the difficulties. The patient who starts out with cognitive decline that is significant can't really participate. So you can't write the meds for someone who has dementia that's going to take them out in the next 6 months, because by that time it's too late. The question you're asking is, when you got the meds, you're good, but now you're not. As a rule, and really by the letter of the law, if you have lost capacity, as we call it, the ability to make decisions, the law folks call it competence, and in medicine we call it capacity, the ability to understand and make decisions. If you've lost capacity at some point, then it is probably not going to be feasible to do it because you can't do it. You're not sure what you're doing. And even though your intentions were very clear, how are you supposed to do it? So it is illegal for family to somehow administer it. It's supposed to be the patient's, very clear. And when that happens, and it has happened certainly, in some ways, the maid issue just kind of falls into the background. Because now we're simply taking care of someone who doesn't have capacity, needs their symptoms managed, needs to be kept comfortable, and at least family are all clear that comfort is the focus, or they wouldn't have done this in the first place. So we take care of them like we would take care of any other patient on hospice. The meds simply don't get used.
As a last question to wrap up our conversation and maybe add a little levity here, what has working so closely with the dying taught you about living?
What have I learned? I've learned not to be afraid. I've learned that the unpredictability of terminal illness extends into the unpredictability of life without a terminal illness. So once again, those wise words of don't wait, do stuff. I've learned that advanced care planning is what you do when you're fine, not what you save up for the end, because you don't know. And because you want your finances to go the way they're supposed to go, you want everybody to get what they're supposed to get, you want everybody on board with the fact that you're not going to be here forever, you want to, and working with the dying has really helped with this, you want to normalize death. What do we all do? We avoid it. Maybe it's instinctual. And avoiding it is fine when you're 27 years old. But as we get older, avoiding it leads to paying a price. You're less prepared. Your family's less prepared. Things don't go that well. You didn't communicate to the doc in the first place what you might want or not want. And so I think the biggest thing I've learned is that the dying thing is unique. It's kind of extraordinary. It's kind of mystical. Just like birth. Just like birth. And the more we can accept that, I think the better you live.
You're listening to State of Mind, Being Human and Living Well. I'm guest host Patrice Vecchione. Today, we're exploring what it means to face death and live with a terminal diagnosis. So far, we've heard from Megan Myers and palliative care physician Dr. John Hausdorff. Up next, writer Kevin Christine Kennedy shares her experience of living with a life-limiting illness. Now, we're joined by Kevin Christine Kennedy, a writer living in Carmel, California, who may not be with us by the time this interview airs. In this lifetime, she's been fortunate to find true love and a deep connection to the wilderness, where she's drawn strength and inspiration. Kevin hopes her story will support others facing end-of-life decisions. As we continue, we turn toward questions of agency, acceptance, and how we might meet dying with clarity, choice, and grace. Welcome, Kevin.
Great to see you, Patrice.
Would you tell us about when you were first diagnosed with cancer?
It was early 2019 for the first go round with cancer. And I had felt a lump that I pretty much ignored for probably a couple months before that. But I did not do breast self-exams for quite a long time, for the main reason of having implants that my body had rejected shortly after my mother had me do them. And they rejected them. My body rejected them twice. And they became like hard little tennis balls. And so my breasts became these foreign bodies attached to my own body that I pretty much ignored.
And how old were you when that happened?
17. And then I guess again at probably 18 and a half, 19 for the second operation.
What emotions did you go through in those early days?
Probably the first one that I had was fear, because the lump was so easily seen. It was pretty large, probably 1.5 inches by 1/2 inch. And so, yeah, I was scared. And then I went from being very fearful to having shame about not following through on the instructions of a doctor who had done the last mammogram, who said there were some irregular spots on my scans and that I should probably come back for another scan in about 3 months or so. And I didn't do that. I probably wasn't back in until after the next diagnosis. So 1.5 years maybe had gone by at that time. I also had shame because of the implants. And from there, I think I jumped to blame. Mothers are always easy targets, and she was wearing a big bullseye on herself. Then I went from there to anger towards my mother, and I think I was angry at myself as well. Mm-hmm. The anger really kicked in when I went to go see the first oncologist, who used fear tactics on me to try to get me to start chemo immediately, with expressions of saying, if you don't start immediately, you will die. And chemo was the last thing I wanted to do. I always believed that chemo was poison that you were pumping into your body, and it made no logical sense to me. So after seeing that oncologist, I went to bed terrified. And when I woke up in the morning, I was enraged that she had done that and said those things. And from there, I went to a 5-day conference that was given by Anita Morjani. And she taught me that when you talk to oncologists, you interview them for a job. So if they don't pass the interview, you just move on to someone else and hire who you feel is the best fit.
And that's what you've done.
And that's what I've done.
So how old were you when you received your initial diagnosis? What was going on in your life at that time?
I was 64, I believe. And Jill and I my wife and I had just gone on a trip to her bucket list place, which was Scotland. And I had to drive because she couldn't see over the dashboard. So I didn't see very much because the driving was a little difficult, to say the least. and she had a wonderful time. And while I was on the trip, I noticed that the seatbelt that I was wearing was constantly rubbing against a sore spot on my right breast. But I really didn't pay much attention to it, didn't pay any attention to it really. Just kept on putting some sort of padding or something in between the seatbelt and that area.
And then was it shortly after your return to California that you looked into what was going on?
No, I guess I continued to be in denial for almost 3 months. So we got back in November, and I didn't actually see it while I was getting undressed until early January.
It's a hard thing to face, and we all have tactics to try to deal with or avoid dealing with something we're afraid of.
Yes.
How did your mental health shift as you processed the reality of the diagnosis?
It really did go from all those emotions that I mentioned before and went from fear to empowerment. And when I stepped into my power, it was quite miraculous, the things that happened. Before starting any kind of treatment at all, and after going to see Anita Morjani, I held a healing circle in my home and with 7 of the most powerful women that I knew. And I actually, during that session, felt the tumor implode in my breast, and went to get an ultrasound appointment, and the technician said, "Wow, the tumor has shrunk. What chemo are you doing? It's really working." And I said, "I'm not doing any chemo." I said, "I'm using energy work," and I did a healing circle, and she rolled her eyes. But it did work. And then after the tumor started growing again, my emotions kind of plummeted, and doubt sort of kicked in a little bit. So I had to sort of battle with that.
I understand that you've chosen to likely not pursue further treatment. And I wonder if you would talk about that decision. What led you to it, and how does it feel to live with it?
All along, from the very first diagnosis of cancer to the second one, which was a kind of different animal, it was much more aggressive, I had been pretty steadfast about not doing chemo. I am someone that's very, very sensitive to medications and drugs and anything else. So I also had an instinctive feeling that I would not do well with chemo. But with the second return of cancer, I didn't have as many options available to me because it was more aggressive. So I was persuaded to do a chemo that was well tolerated. And I think I was on that for about 6 months, and I did well with that. All the other chemos after that, and there's probably been about 6 or 7 different ones after that, I did not do well on at all. And so that also was a big factor in deciding, okay, so do I want to live the rest of my days with this inside me that is continuing to grow, is not really slowing down? The chemo's not slowing it down. It's not shrinking it. Do I want to live the rest of my days feeling sick and weak and completely drained of any energy and having a brain that was completely clouded over with the medication? Or did I want to stop it and feel good, feel like myself, and call the shots myself in a way that would feel comfortable to me.
Once again, a choice for empowerment is what it sounds like.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about what assisted death is?
Sure. So I was able to have an appointment with a wonderful doctor who explained the whole sequence of events. Your home delivered some vials that you mix together. There's, I believe, 4 different drugs, 3 or 4, and they're a powder. They taste awful, but apparently this doctor does a milkshake of sorts, takes a blender, puts vanilla ice cream, chocolate syrup, and gives you a milkshake. The patient administers it themselves. And you can only get this formula if it's decided that you have 6 months or less to live. This doctor, he gives a little bit of a sedative, I guess, to just help you relax. And then you have the formula. One drug speeds up the heart. Another drug speeds down the heart. So you have a kind of a cardiac arrhythmia and eventually arrest. And there's the other drugs are telling the brain what to do as far as shutting down.
So do you have a sense, Kevin, and if this is too difficult a question, we can just let it go, but what would decide for you that you were at that point?
When the pain gets too much for me to be able to control without side effects from the medication, and I'm finding that I have been diagnosed by a nurse practitioner of being narcotically naive, meaning my body just does not handle drugs very well. One dose of drugs they gave me just to try it out to see how it would do for future was the lowest dose possible of something that lots of people take, I guess, and there's also a patch they make. And I took it, and in no time at all was projectile vomiting. So that one was out, obviously. So it's now a matter of finding what works and what doesn't.
Is there anything that you would like others going through this to know?
Trust your gut. Trust your intuition. Do not take the word of the first oncologist, and make sure that you have a understanding and rapport, excuse me, with the oncologist, and that you feel comfortable with working with them. If not, move on to someone else. And also be really gentle with yourself. Love yourself as much as possible. And if you can get to a place of truly loving yourself, then I think anything is possible as far as healing goes.
Talking with our guests today has changed how I look at the end of life. Their honesty, clarity, and deep reflection helped demystify the experience of moving toward death and eased some of my own fear about it. I want to share that Megan passed away on May 3rd, 2025, surrounded by her dear friend and family, with the sound of ocean waves in her ears. We wish to honor her here. Both Megan and Kevin were candid and open-hearted as they shared their courage, presence, and wisdom. Alongside Dr. Hausdorff's illuminating insights, These conversations have inspired me to feel not only more at ease, but even curious about what lies ahead. Dying is something we and our loved ones are all going to experience. We hope taking this time to listen to what dying can be like will help you grow more comfortable with death so that when the time comes, you can meet it with greater understanding, presence, and peace.
You've been listening to State of Mind, being human and living well.
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 A huge thank you to our guest host, Patrice Vecchione, and to all our show guests, Megan Myers, Kevin Christine Kennedy, and Dr. John Hausdorff. And thanks to you for joining us. To learn more about the topics we discussed today, be sure and check out the wealth of information on the resource list included in the show notes. If you enjoyed today's show, you may also want to check out episode 76 on medical aid in dying, episode 68 on caring for your aging parent, and episode 79, Aging with Resilience, which also features guest host Patrice Vecchione. New episodes of State of Mind are released the first Sunday of every month, and you can find them along with our complete archive on our website at www.stateofmindmedia.org. If you missed part of today's episode or you just want to hear it again, you can subscribe to all our podcasts on any major podcast platform. And when you rate and review the podcast, it helps others find it too. So could you please take a moment to do that for us if you enjoyed this or any of our episodes? Thanks to Yusuf Hassanein for audio production and volunteer coordination, Vijay Luca for audio production, Tanmai Kadamani for transcriptions, Priscilla Yee and Grishma Jain for graphic design, Nimalan Ellen Chauvin for marketing, Heather Franks and Katrina Tattenham for research, Jennifer Young and Evelyn Strauss for promotional editing, and a special thank you to musician Adrian Legg and Favored Nations Entertainment for our theme music. State of Mind was developed and originally broadcast in association with KSQD-FM in Santa Cruz, California. Join us again next month for a brand new episode of State of Mind. Until then, live well.